but University of Iowa Press would say pare it down or cut it entirely. Cut the number of quotations, especially long ones. In general, more of your own voice and less of others' voices. So utilize paraphrasing and summarizing skills. This is contrary to what we do in our dissertation, where we need to show all these different scholars and what they say, and we're working on developing our own voice, but our own voice comes maybe at the conclusion of what other scholars have said in our summarizing, assessing, differing with, contrasting, and making decisions on the information that we've presented. However, in the book, you want to use your own voice more, right? Summarizing the information that you found. Comb through the manuscript, replace the jargon with more fluid and clear language. An easy way to find the chunky language is to read the chapters aloud. Another is to discuss the work with an educated person not in your field. That way, they're not already a specialist, where, if you're a specialist and you read, historical Jesus, oh, well, everybody knows what that is. But if a non-specialist, someone in education says historical Jesus, well, I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about. So have a non-specialist read it, an educated person not in your field. Cut a third to a half of the notes. If it can't be seamlessly incorporated into the text, dump it. Now, in our scholarly academic writing, we want our notes because that substantiates where our research is coming from, right? It shows the breadth of our readership. It shows, of the research that we have done. It shows that we're aware of the field and the current standing of the field, which is critical for our dissertation, as well as for any academic publication. However, in a dissertation turned book, we want to pare that way down so that it's more seamlessly integrated. Excuse me. If you've divided your chapters into sections and subsections with their own headings, take out the outline structure and work on transitions from one idea to the next. It'll make your book more unified and readable. 7, pare down the bibliography. As a student, you want to show, again, like I said with your notes, you want to show the breadth of your research. And you also want to show perhaps even the history of your field or topic. Or in my case, I might talk about the study of purity and impurity in the Hebrew Bible and in the Second Temple and in Qumran. And then I might also talk about the historical Jesus and the study of the historical Jesus. So my bibliography would need to show that I'm aware of the history on this field as well as the current standing. Well, a non-specialist reading a book aimed at wider readership is not really going to care for that depth of bibliography. Still show your bibliography, but don't overwhelm your readers. Just the most pertinent sources. And of course, if you have referred to a source directly, you must absolutely keep it in the bibliography. You'll probably need to update your research by the time you get around to publishing, because things will have changed in that time. And you'll need to incorporate new articles and books that have appeared since you finished your dissertation. Work the ideas into the text and add them to the bibliography. Okay, so I'd like to finalize with a few questions here. First of all, I'm going to leave you with the question: is your dissertation best served as an article or book or presentation? One of the things one of the authors suggested was it might not even be an article in, say, the SBL, or for those in theology, AAR. Or any of the other academic journals, which, as a side note, brings me to say, which perhaps touches on my other presentation, is you should be familiar with whatever journals pertain to your particular field, right? So that might be, if you are in biblical studies, of course, you'd better know Society of Biblical Literature, or the Journal for Biblical Literature, which is published by the Society of Biblical Literature annually. I'm sorry, not annually. I believe it's quarterly. And the conference is annually. One national and one international. And then you would probably also want to know other specialist journals, like Enoch, for instance, if you're looking at studies in Enoch, or like maybe Discoveries in the Judean Desert. And there's a few on Qumran and the Scrolls. And there's a few others. So you would want to know that. If it's on historical or church history studies, you'd want to know that field. So whatever your journals are, And then since we are in the Renewal Academy, we would probably want to be publishing in NUMA, which is the journal for SPS, which you should become familiar with because you're at Regent, or we should all become familiar with at Regent. Now, I'm sorry if this is very introductory and basic and you already know all this. Please forgive me. I'm not trying to talk down to anyone, but trying to touch on anything that someone might not know. So think about, is it best served as an article or a book or a series of articles or a presentation? It might be a presentation that you develop and you present that is never actually published. But also is what some of the authors recommended is you might work one of the chapters or a couple of the chapters so that you can use it in seeking faculty positions, and it's readable so that for the faculty search committee they can look at it and be familiar with your work and your research and your scholarship. So that's another thing you want to do with, or you can do with your dissertation. Secondly, what pretty much everyone recommended was you want to have those honest people in your corner that can accurately look at and assess your work and honestly tell you whether or not there is value in publishing this. So, and that's something that we need to be mindful of, and that is cultivating those friendships and relationships with those people in our lives that are either in our field or in other fields, but are going to be honest with us to say, okay, this doesn't read well at all. I would never buy this. Please rewrite this. And maybe they wouldn't say it in that way, but that they would be honest enough with us to say, you need to work on this, or your thesis is off base here, or this isn't really representing the current field. So from what I read and also from my own perspective, I would say cultivate those relationships with people in your field. And as you go studying, you'll start knowing, oh, okay, well, this person specializes in, and for me, I apologize that I'm using a lot of biblical studies references. That's because that's my field, so that's what I've gotten to know more so. So I might know, okay, this person focuses on purity and impurity, and I know a couple people, and they're in a couple universities, and I might write them, and oh, these people specialize in historical Jesus. These people specialize in Dead Sea Scrolls, and they're the foremost scholars in these things. And as you go reading and looking at your footnotes and bibliography, you're going to start to see who your important scholars are. Who are those scholars that everyone else is interacting with? And then what I've done, and I would recommend, is go to SBL and email them and say, hey, I'd like to chat. Meet them, go to their presentations. And when you go to SBL, you'll get to see also new scholars that are presenting or new upcoming voices. It's interesting that one of the books I'm using right now is by Susan Haber, who actually passed away before completing her PhD. I believe she was even in master's level or she was still in school. But the writings that she had done at that point were already so important and influential in my subject matter. So there might be people that you'll go hear that are still in the master's program, or maybe they're PhD students and their research is still important. So I'd say find those academic voices, and then those other non-specialist voices that are going to be honest with you and be real with you. And I call it your get real academic voice. And that they're going to be honest with you and tell you, this, if you want to publish this as a book, I'd think about this. Or they're going to ask you the hard questions. Or like those who had the privilege of working with Dr. Twelftree will get their papers with red all over. And that's a good thing because it can hone your skills and your research and refine, and his questions get you thinking and digging more. And finally, my third question is, how can my and when I say thesis, I'm not talking about like your master's thesis, but that statement of your proposal, right? And your research object, your question, what you're answering with your dissertation. How can my this question or this research that this question I'm answering, this research that I'm conducting, how can it relate more broadly? Because more than likely there are multiple ways that it relates broadly, and it might touch on different things. So that's where you can either think about reworking it as a book to relate more broadly, or working it as several articles that relate in different directions, if that makes any sense. So one might go to Enoch, one might go to Discoveries in the Judean Desert, one might go to Studies on the Historical Jesus, and I might be misquoting the titles of the journals entirely. One might go to SBL, one might go to Pneuma, as we're focusing on, the particularly renewal implications of this subject. And that's going to do a few different things, and maybe that's a fourth question. What is it that you want to do with your question? What is it that your question is going to do? Is your impact primarily to the academy? Is it primarily to academy and perhaps more educated readers who are interested in it? Or is it just maybe a more popular question? So some people who are writing on, say, political theology, you might want to boil that down into something that the man on the street can read, or the woman on the street can read, because political theology has such a bearing on our daily lives. So you might be writing articles in several different places, more academic articles to influence the academic community, and then other, or maybe not influence as in the sense that we could primarily be influential, but in the sense that you start, because your research is going to be important, because you're going to hone in on a very specific narrow set and subset of data or of research or of texts, and give it your complete and undivided attention for a period of years, which most people can't do. So that means that when you come away with your insights that you've gleaned from that depth of study, what you have to say is going to be important if we've conducted our research with good and sound methodology. So if we have done so, and we've been challenged throughout to go deeper and be accurate and be as broad as we need to be and as narrow as we need to be at the same time, then hopefully our conclusions will be a contribution to the current knowledge on the subject, or a corrective to current interpreted knowledge or current theology or current praxis. Although praxis, I guess, we're not touching too much because this is primarily a research field, it will nonetheless have bearing, say, for instance, if you're looking at on church history or on a more of a theology. Absolutely it has to do with praxis, because it is how we think about things, or how we think about God, or how we think about ourselves in relation to the world is us doing theology, and our lack of good theology can have extremely practical implications. So there is an element of praxis in that. So as you're assessing your question, how is it, how will it be best served? And then how is your career best served by it as well? So publishing is important. It's important for our career. And it's important for us to be able to put those ideas and that research out there where the scholarly academic community, the church community, the broader community can interact with the research and the thoughts and the things that we've put together. So I guess I'll just finish summarizing those questions again. Is your dissertation best served as an article or book or presentation or some other means? Who is your get real academic voice and your non-academic / educated or outside view? Third, how can my thesis proposal or my proposal statement, my research question relate more broadly, relate to a broader audience? And fourth, that was third, and fourth is what is it that I'm intending to do with my research question? What is it that I'm intending to do? And that will partially help to answer question number one. And then keep in the back of your head how all of this relates to your ongoing career field. Are you primarily going to be a publishing academic, or are you going to be teaching, or a mix of both, or in the church, or a mix of all three? So all of those things have bearing on whether you decide to publish